Perfect. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Today's speaker is Jessica Moreno. Jessica is the Conservation Science Director with the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection. She has a degree in wildlife conservation and management from the University of Arizona and more than 15 years of experience in carnivore research, road ecology, and wildlife corridor conservation in southern Arizona and northern New Mexico. Jessica previously served as the president of the Arizona chapter of the Wildlife Society, in addition to other roles on the executive board. She led the wildlife linkages and wilderness programs at Sky Island Alliance and formerly wrote the Sonoran Sage column for Tucson Desert Leaf magazine. Her brief call to fame. Jessica met Robert Redford. Yes, I'm so jealous. She also met Don Henley and the Eagles for an award recognizing ceremony for her work with borderland jaguars. So this is just so cool, Jessica. I'm so excited that you had that opportunity. Yeah, to meet them. That's so cool. Okay, and with that, the floor is yours to share your work.
Thank you. I'm really so happy to be here. It was great to get the invite, although I do feel just a little bit like I'm giving a thesis defense to all the experts that I learned this stuff from. So feel free to pepper me with those questions too. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Okay.
Hopefully you can all see that.
Yes, looks great.
All right. Okay. All right, great. So today I was asked to give you a presentation that I had previously shared with the Santa Cruz River Research Days. So if you were there, you might be familiar with it. And then I also presented this at the International Conference on Ecology and Transportation last April, I think, this year. So it's been around a little bit. I'm gonna take it slowly, and there's lots of time for questions. I plan to give you a little bit more detail, and we can talk about other things you have questions about too, since this was designed largely for a quick 15-minute talk, and I know we have more time than that. So happy to see all of you here. I recognize a lot of names. What we're talking about today is an important wildlife linkage between the Tucson and the Tortolita Mountains. So I'm calling this Bridging the Great Sonoran Divide. I work for the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection, which I hope is familiar with you. And we are, you know, actually very closely in partnership with Pima County on a number of issues. I would say that the coalition's sort of was a product of the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan and putting that all together. This group of organizations and people who were working to help implement the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan. And wildlife linkages is one of the things that we have our shared interest in. So hopefully you're familiar with us in that sense. The Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan, of course, is, you know, a shining star of Pima County's work in conservation and environment in the county. And the coalition focuses on several of those really important wildlife linkages that are identified there. So those stars there are some of our focal areas. And hopefully this is not too old news or repeated for you if you're really, really familiar with it. But our first wildlife bridge in the Sonoran Desert was built in Pima County. And I'm going to briefly talk about that first as sort of a background template for what we're looking at doing moving forward. So up in Oro Valley, next to the Catalina State Park, we have a wildlife linkage or a movement corridor that was mapped in 2006 by Paul Beyer as part of the Arizona Wildlife Linkages Assessment. And it connects the Catalina Mountains with the Tortolita Mountains. But we have SR 77 slicing right through the center of that. And we knew we knew way back then that they were going to be widening that road from a 4-lane highway to a 6-lane divided highway, and that would become an even worse situation for wildlife movement. So the coalition started their first wildlife camera monitoring project with residents in the area in 2012. So we were monitoring what wildlife were in the area and where they were moving around about 5 years before the construction of the first wildlife bridge in 2016. So, and there was an underpass too. So, and this is also in conjunction with Pima County's work to purchase and protect open space. Most recently, the 109-acre Kelly Ranch to expand Catalina State Park and other efforts in the area. So the wildlife bridge itself and underpass were highly successful. We saw animals using them almost right away. Arizona Game and Fish was partnering with us by monitoring on the crossing structures themselves to get passage rates. And then our cameras were in the area to kind of get a sense of what is in the area that could be using the crossings that might not be. So we could mitigate that if that was a problem. And on the bridge, right away, within the week, we had mule deer, javelina, bobcat, and coyote are the most common species that we see using the crossings, and they are going both directions. They're going east and west on these crossings between Catalina State Park and Big Wash. We've had a few notable records, including black bear. There was a white-nosed coati. We've seen lots of badgers, desert tortoise, and we've seen mountain lion using them. So it's been very successful. We've even seen a bighorn sheep that approached the underpass, very close to the underpass, but didn't actually go through it. So that was exciting. And then Game and Fish has also been doing roadkill surveys, and we have been doing some roadkill surveys to show the before and after effects of putting in these crossing structures and what that does. And in addition to that, we recently started doing some wildlife fencing surveys to make sure that the fence was in good condition and we weren't seeing too many holes in there. So wildlife crossings, basically, we were able to prove with this first bridge and underpass that they work and that they're successful. So they're a win-win solution for everyone. We can reduce roadkill. We can help wildlife connect across core habitat areas. The other arm of that wildlife linkage, though, is one of the most threatened in the state, according to the Arizona Linkages Assessment way back in 2006. I think that has changed. If anything, it's become more critical. So northwest of Tucson in Marana, Interstate 10 is already a 6-lane divided highway, and it splits the Tucson Mountain and Tortolita Mountains wildlife linkage. This is a really important linkage for potentially bighorn sheep. We have seen bighorn sheep in the Tucson Mountains coming over from the Silver Bells. And with the reintroduction of bighorn sheep in the Catalina Mountains, we have an opportunity here to really bridge that gap for them and potentially see populations of bighorn in the Tortolita Mountains. So that would be really awesome. It's also really important for desert tortoise, mule deer, mountain lion. We have also documented kit fox in this area. So, and the fact that it intersects too with the Santa Cruz River and El Rio Preserve and places where the county has really invested a lot of time and energy and money in conserving is important. And there's permanent surface water at those places too, which is very special in the desert. So this wildlife linkage kind of acts like a lifeline to the ecological viability of Ironwood National Monument, to the Teal Nation lands, to Ever Valley, to Tucson Mountain Park, Saguaro National Park West, as well as El Rio Preserve and Tortolita Preserve and the Tortolita Mountain Park. So it has wide-reaching impacts, and is something we want to try to make sure we protect and maintain and fix where it's broken. I'm just reading through here. Yeah. So this area, though, you know, it's broken by I-10. And in addition to I-10, that's not the only obstacle that wildlife have to navigate to get between these two mountain ranges, which they need to do for finding food, finding mates, dispersing to new habitats for the genetic health of these populations. And, I-10 is a formidable barrier, but in addition to that, they also have to cross over the frontage roads, the railroad line. There's fencing along these roadways as well. And then they also have to get past the levee into the Santa Cruz River as well. So that's a lot. That's a lot of obstacles. And then in addition to this, we're also keeping a really close eye on open space development and making sure the linkage is remains as open as it is now, so that we can maintain the linkage into the future. Currently, there's only one place where animals can attempt to cross safely, and this is at I-10, very close to Aver Valley Road. There is an abandoned railroad underpass there that animals could potentially be using. So that is the site of our future planned wildlife bridge. Hopefully it won't look like this with the bridge going over everything. Actually, ADOT, it has a plan in the future to flatten this whole area. They're going to bring the road down to grade level and use the infill dirt from this spot over, I believe at Twin Peaks or something. So there's no timeline for that, no budget for that yet, but it is like penciled in as something that will be happening in the future. And that is our opportunity, really, to make this into something better. So at the coalition, we knew this was going to be a really important spot to be monitoring and giving people opportunity to become engaged with and own, and also to keep in the top of our minds as an important wildlife corridor. So we started in 2015, actually, with a small BioBlitz where we set up some wildlife cameras in the Tucson mountains. And then slowly grew from that into a study that we started in 2017 that now encompasses both sides of the highway. And we have 10 stratified study sites between the Tortolita Mountains and Saguaro National Park in the linkage. So we've got 4 cameras in each stratified area, and we're seeing a lot of really cool animals. We're seeing kit foxes, badgers, mountain lions, especially close to the water. We get a lot of birds, and in fact, I even got a photograph of a pheasant, which was interesting. We don't know where that one came from. But this is the gist of the study design, is that we're trying to see what's different east and west of the highway, and also get a sense of how the species richness and other factors are differing between these land ownership or jurisdictions, with Pima County, Town of Oro Valley, Saguaro National Park, and others. So west of I-10 so far, at least, we're seeing a lot of javelina and a lot of coyotes, a lot of cottontail, quite a few birds, and it does seem to be pretty healthy in terms of the trophic pyramid. We're seeing plenty of carnivores. We're seeing plenty of food down that food chain. So that's good. We're keeping an eye on especially the skunk populations. We have 4 species of skunks here in the Sonoran Desert. And Sparrow National Park for many, many years has been noticing a decline in the diversity and the abundance of skunks in general. And we have been seeing that in our camera data as well. So we're tracking that to see what's happening with those mesocarnivores. But we have seen badgers and we have gray fox and a lot of those others. So it's good to just kind of take a look at like what the balance of species looks like different west of I-10, where we have that permanent water. And then east of I-10, where again, we're seeing mostly javelina, a lot more jackrabbits on the east side, a lot of coyotes. We're seeing a lot more mule deer on the east side, and I think that largely has to do with the habitat types. Once we get down into details and compare some of the habitat characteristics in each of these strata, I think that will pull out more information for us. But we also found kit foxes, was really cool. And we identified a few places where they were burrowing in the cascaded development that Pima County owns up there. So that was pretty exciting for us. One of the things that we're tracking is mule deer, especially because when you build a wildlife crossing structure, certain species are, keystone species to use and try to aim for when you're building a crossing. In Oro Valley, we have both a bridge and an underpass, and we've found that predictably, deer really like to use the bridge, and javelina really like to use the underpass, and they will use either one, but for the most part, deer are pretty heavily preferring the bridge. They like that clear view. So different structures are good for different species or preferred by different species. So for a wildlife bridge, we want it to be at a slope and a size and an extent enough to accommodate as many species as possible. And deer is one of those. And if we can get deer and we can get desert tortoises across, I think we can get just about anything. So we're kind of focusing on those. Here I've just kind of looked at the cumulative detections we have of mule deer across our study sites, and you can see that we are seeing quite a few more deer. This blue dotted line, I can use the little thing. This blue dotted line here is Scenic Drive. So that's along the Tucson Mountains, just south of the Los Morteros area of Pima counties. And it's all private property. And we do see quite a few deer there. In addition to this, we've also been working with Dr. Brian Blaze and his previous roadkill survey studies to kind of continue that in some key areas that he was monitoring and that we're interested in monitoring. So we did some preliminary roadkill surveys along the frontage road there between Cortero Road and Twin Peaks. And now we're doing a more in-depth survey in not exactly there, but around the area to look at what we might be seeing. And with that first preliminary survey that we did, we tracked the frontage roads and the highway for 7 days, consecutive days, sunrise surveys, and only one road-killed animal came up, and it was a domestic dog. So that, like, more surveys need to be done. Of course, we always say more research needs to be done, but that's starting to indicate that this linkage is so broken, animals aren't even attempting to cross for the most part. So since then, we have gathered a few other roadkill records in this area. I'm interested in more. If you ever see anything, you can add it to our iNaturalist project. But for the most part, we're not seeing a whole lot, even trying to attempt to cross this area. So, I think the roadkill studies, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this record. This is a female mountain lion was killed on Pitcher Rocks Road. I think it was 2007 or 2008. And Saguaro National Park is actually going to be starting their own wildlife camera study right here in Pitcher Rocks, along Pitcher Rocks Road. And we're going to be combining our data and sharing our data here to see what more we can learn from that. But roads are just like a really big problem, especially Pitcher Rocks Road. As you know, Saguaro National Park is working really hard to reduce roadkill there. And wildlife crossings are one of those ways that we fix it. So roadkill data is extremely valuable. We have our Wildlife Road Watch project on iNaturalist so that people can share their observations across Pima County to give us a sense of where hotspots are. That's opportunistic data and really kind of depends on who's looking and how often, but combining that with what we've got going on with roadkill surveys with Saguaro National Park and ourselves and Arizona Game and Fish and others, we're starting to get a picture of what it looks like. There's also some more, there's also some more pieces to this puzzle too, because every time, as you know, because you guys each work on these things, wildlife crossing structures are not just one project. We have to look at funding. We have to look at open space protection, so it's not a bridge to nowhere. And we've been engaging in a lot of different places with partners, such as Pima County and Arizona Game and Fish and others. So we have their Desert Fence Busters, who is in Avra Valley, removing barbed wire fence to create more open space for deer and bighorn to move through. Riparian restoration is going on at El Rio Preserve and in the river. Thanks to you guys. We're working on policy. We're working on community outreach. We're opposing Interstate 11. And now there's the Santa Cruz River Urban Wildlife Refuge effort. So there's a lot going on, and it takes a village, and it takes a long time. We're in it for the long haul, essentially. The first wildlife crossing over in Oro Valley was funded by tax dollars through the Pima County Regional Transportation Authority. And so this next one, we have to see now how we're going to raise money to this, if it's going to be through RTA Next or not, or if it's going to be a combination of things. So that's one of the big pieces of this puzzle too, is not just the planning and the logistics, but the how as well as the why. We have done some public outreach through our Critter Camp for Kids curriculum. We partnered with the Kindred Spirits Gallery opening at the Desert Museum about roadkill. We're trying to get the word out about this stuff. I think the work that you are doing, Pima County is doing with your community outreach and education programs is absolutely stellar and helps a lot too, because we can just point people to you guys. And of course, there's always new emerging issues. So undergirding all of this is the work of local people power and coalition building and, Pima County. You're such an important element of this. And on that note, we've been working, or at least collaborating a little bit with Nanda and you folks on the Santa Cruz River wildlife ramp that you just constructed. This is so exciting to me. I really love going down there, boots on the ground, and touring it and seeing it in person. It really does bring together all the best practices that we know, all the lessons learned that we've gained so far. When I presented this at the ICOIT, at the International Conference on Ecology and Transportation, people had a lot of questions and excitement about this particular project. So if you're not familiar, the Santa Cruz River Wildlife Ramp is something that Pima County constructed in the Santa Cruz River right here at our future wildlife crossing site. And it allows wildlife to get in and out or past that levee, that's soil cement levee, while still maintaining the purpose of what that levee does for water. So we're still allowing wildlife to move in and out of the river corridor while still doing the job of the levee. And this is a really, really critical piece of this larger puzzle, and it was a complicated one because it requires a lot of new engineering and new thinking about how this can be done. Well, this is built. This is there, and you can go see it. Just last week, I went down there and we placed wildlife cameras. So we have, let's see, I'm going to get my laser pointer here. We have a wildlife camera right here, which, the next flood may but we're going to see how much we can get before then. It's an older camera. And then we have cameras that are set up here underneath the bridge on either side. And we have cameras out here. There is a jump out. So this whole area right now is currently enclosed by wildlife funnel fencing. So essentially the door is closed until the wildlife crossing is built and all the remaining pieces are put into place. That way we're not funneling animals right up into the highway where we don't want them yet, right? So, or ever. So the ramp's built, it's there, it's ready. We're monitoring to see what animals are going in and out of it and testing it out, but they are blocked from using this pass. Right now, we're trying to cross the road at any other point. So I don't expect that these cameras will show us very much right away, but I'm hoping we get some good photos of a few things, and it's exciting to see that start to happen, and then have that opportunity for the before and after too. So once this does open up and we do have a crossing at some point, we can see how that changes over time. So excellent job, guys. This one was really exciting. And working with Nanda is fun, and Marissa too. So this has been a really fun one to watch. And I'm also really pleased too that Pima County is going to be taking the lead on putting together a working group to see if there's other places in the county where something like this could be helpful to help animals get in and out of our waterways. So that's cool. This is my end, so it's like my, thank you to all the people. I oftentimes use a quote when I'm doing these talks from Thomas Lovejoy. The choice is not between wild places and people, but it's between a rich or impoverished existence. He says for man, I leave that part out, but for people. And that is so true. And I think that the best things about getting to work with Pima County on these wildlife linkage issues is that the solutions are win-win, and they really do help people as well as wildlife and open space, and improve everyone's quality of life in the process. So that's a talking point that I like to make with the general public a lot, is that, yeah, it costs money to put in a wildlife crossing structure, but the benefit that you get back from that pays for itself very quickly. And in fact, at the International Conference of Ecology and Transportation, I usually just call it IQUIT, I encourage you all to go. It's a great fun. They happen every other year in the US. That, trying to do the economic math of how much they're worth and how much value you get from a wildlife crossing structure over time, they essentially pay for themselves in a year or two back to the community, so they're extremely valuable in many ways, and including financially. So, it's we can have roads, and we can have wildlife, and we can have a thriving desert river ecosystem if we make the choice to do it right. And it does take collaboration, and it does take time and moving at the speed of trust, right? But it's fun. The process is fun. It's really cool to see the end result. So apologies to Kate. I know she's here. This is like my back of the napkin drawing. It's a rough sketch. Please don't consider it in any way official at all. I made this to kind of help visualize what we hope to achieve. It's not intended to be that accurate, but I hope it's inspirational. Something like this is possible. We've done it successfully before, and we can do it here too. and we can kind of stitch this landscape together here at between the Tucson and the Tortolita Mountains. And this is incredibly important right now. The more I hear from Sorrow National Park too about the future of Sorrow National Park West and the Tucson Mountains in general, because it is so completely isolated and increasingly isolated. It just needs these open linkages so that mountain lions and bighorn sheep and kit foxes and all of that can get where they need to go. So I went through that really quickly, and I know we will have some more time. I want to be able to give time for people to ask questions also. And you can always reach out, I feel like also there's people in this audience who can answer a lot of questions too. So I'm happy to have a larger discussion if that's what we want to do for the remainder of our time too. And I'm going to stop sharing unless I need to go back to a different slide. I can't
Thank you,
see.
Jessica.
Yeah, there you go.
Such a cool project. Yeah. We have.
It is fun.
It is fun. We have a few questions on the chat. Kimberly is asking, why don't you funnel the animals to the abandoned underpass?
Well, because currently there's other obstacles there too. They still have to navigate the frontage road, and they still have to navigate the railroad also. And currently we don't have the infrastructure in place to kind of just like the cattle crossing guards and fencing to keep them just going through that very narrow area. So that's something interesting to talk about. I think we could keep that in mind as we're looking at how long it might take to get something built there. I will be placing cameras in that wildlife and in that abandoned underpass here shortly. I'm just waiting for my permit to come in from ADOT. And we'll get a sense of what's using it now. There's some big concrete vehicle barriers placed there too. So I agree that trying to make that as open as possible makes sense, but we also don't want to create a situation where animals can't get onto the road, and get stuck there. So for now, we're fencing them off. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, another question. How much did the Oracle Wildlife Bridge cost? And how much is the estimate for the one over I-10? Are there viable alternatives to building the bridge without ADOT rebuilding the I-10? Maybe you can read it, you will understand more the question.
Without rebuilding the 10.
Okay.
Yeah, so wildlife crossing structures are always going to be a lot cheaper if you can coincide the construction project with widening the road or some other construction project that is already going to be going on. With Oracle Road, that was the case. They were going to be widening the road. They were already planning on doing all of those detours and all of that stuff. So it was much cheaper to plan it to coincide with that. The timing has to be right, and you have to have the funding in place to do that. The Oracle Road wildlife crossing structures. So there was a bridge and an underpass, plus all of the wildlife funnel fencing that keeps animals going to the structures and off the highway. I believe the budget was $11 million, and I think we came under budget, and it was something closer to $9 million. I'll have to double check because I'm just riffing off the top of my head here. I know we have it on our website too, but it was less than $11 million. Now, of course, it would be a lot more. Cost of materials has just gone up. Everything's more expensive. And this crossing structure would be quite large because it would have to span the railroad as well as the frontage roads and the interstate. So I can't put a number to it because I don't have any basis for setting one, but it would be probably, yeah, it would be several tens of millions of dollars. And it is something that I think we can get creative with trying to find the funding for, whether RTA next happens or not. We can combine funding. There is also that project in LA, in California, the wildlife crossing that's going over, I think it's the 101, for mountain lions mostly. The start of that project created a funding mechanism where people can donate and get private funding for a lot of these things. And so they're going, that might be an option, a funding option as well. I think it's just going to take a combination of things. It's going to take a lot of pre-planning, timing it right, and using what we have, you know. I hope that makes sense. So in terms of like, if ADOT doesn't rebuild the 10, it is in their plans in the future. It's just not on the calendar yet. It would just be more expensive to do. And if they're already planning on flattening that piece of the road, it makes sense to try to coincide with that.
Okay. We have another question about, do you have any insurance data that would show the car damage statistics from deer versus auto?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that is. So talking with the folks who really dive into like the economics, this is so much fun because we get to nerd out on these kinds of statistics and stuff. I can't pull anything specific for you here. I know maybe statewide, Arizona wide, there might be, and there definitely is nationally. Deer are the most dangerous animal in the US. More people die from deer collisions with cars than anything else. So those statistics, I don't have them at my fingertips, but I can definitely get them to you or show you where you can find them. But that is a very good, interesting talking point that we use. Usually we pull that data for like the safety argument to say, you know, the point here is to connect open space and protect wildlife populations. But you also at the same time are reducing roadkill, which some people want, and you're also reducing wildlife vehicle collisions. So in terms of what ADOT really likes to fund and do, it would be more about the safety issue and making sure that we put in crossing structures like the one going up by Mountain Air on the near Flagstaff right now for elk. And that was specifically to reduce vehicle collisions that were happening. So that data exists. Yes.
Okay, thank you. We have lots of questions. Fantastic work, says Mead. I agree, it is exciting. It might be too early to say, and not many species on the other side of the fence yet. But are you able to detect yet if animals will be using the jump-in features to get down to the river?
Yes. So thanks. Last week we put in the cameras at the ramp. One of those is at the jump out. So very specifically, I have a camera just looking at the jump out to see if anything's going to be using that. And for folks who don't know, a jump out is like this berm of dirt that comes up to the wildlife fence that allows animals to escape from the road if they're stuck on the road. So if you have a wildlife funnel fence that's keeping animals off the highway, you want to put these jump outs about every mile along the way so that if something does get onto the road, they have an escape route. And these were built into the fencing that went around the wildlife ramp, specifically for the same reason. This way animals can get into the wildlife ramp from the river and just be in there, stopped by the fence and they can't go through. But if they're coming from the other way, if they did come across the highway already, or they're already in that small open space there, they have that jump out so they can get into the ramp and out. So yes, we have cameras there, and I'm kind of excited just to see those, because if we do get a coyote or something using it, it should be a fun image to see. So yeah, we're doing that.
Yeah. Kimberly, you have a question?
Yeah, I enjoyed learning about the wildlife ramp on the Santa Cruz. I wonder about its utility, just given how agile animals are. Like, what was unmet? What was the unmet need for that structure? Because I've seen javelinas and deer and so many others on very steep surfaces and navigating them rather well.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it is true that some animals can navigate that steep levee. Deer, maybe even coyotes. But the problem there was that they may not want to. It's not easy. And especially in that one spot where we need them to cross, if we're going to put a crossing structure there, where it's especially steep. And it also didn't accommodate a lot of other species, so like desert tortoise or other species that wouldn't be able to navigate that. So the point is really to try to make it as easy as possible and as welcoming as possible for the wildlife to use them. If we had the wildlife crossing structure with no ramp, I can't say for sure because I don't have camera data to show, but I'm pretty sure we would see animals just turn around and go back over rather than try to make that jump or try to crawl down, or not get up there at all. So it just depends. It's really species specific. I do know, like deer in particular, we have a particular slope that we look for in the wildlife ridges, and if it's too steep, they just don't want to use it. So can and want are two different things, I think. But that would be interesting to kind of see which animals do use those, do that, and how often. And I think there is another study that has been done. I think it's completed by Michael Bogan at the U of A, where they had cameras in our washes, looking at the species using the washes. So that would be really interesting to ask them if they've observed any of that and from what species too. That'd be interesting to know.
Okay. Brian says, I think the frontage roads on both sides of the abandoned railroad underpass are quite low traffic. Perhaps a traffic analysis would provide some assurance that risk to wildlife is fairly low to funnel wildlife to that point. It's a comment.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there have been lots of studies, not lots, there have been studies about traffic flow and how that affects roadkill and avoidance of roads. So certain animals will avoid a road just because there's a lot of traffic and lights going back and forth. They're more likely to try to cross when it's low traffic. And so in some places, we've actually seen more roadkill on low traffic roads because more animals are trying to cross on them there. It's kind of just like an interesting finding that came out of that study in California. But it's good that it's low traffic, and I think that will help us out. We also have the railroad there, and there have been very, very few studies about roadkill occurrences on railroads. So that's another interesting one too. I don't know, it has a lot to do with just animal avoidance also, as well as, the attempting on it, but it's a good point.
Yeah, it makes sense, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Edward, from Town of Marana, how much outreach has occurred to the Town of Marana Council regarding these corridors crossings and the importance of maintaining open space?
Yeah, I don't know if Kate, you want to speak up and answer this question better. Carolyn Campbell was kind of leading the point on that, and now Kate for our organization on that work. I know that the Marana had a draft conservation plan in place, but they never adopted it or something like that. Yeah, so there has been conversations, and we're trying to continue to push those conversations with this. Another place that we're really focused on in here too is within this linkage is Rattlesnake Pass. So if you take Twin Peaks Road over the Tucson Mountains right there, that's Rattlesnake Pass. They're doing construction there right now. That's another place where we would like to see a wildlife bridge in the future, a much smaller one, but that's another choke point that we're looking at too. And we had been talking with Marana previously about that before the last RTA ended, but we didn't get it done in time to get that funded for this construction project. So yeah, I think we could always be doing more if you want to help. But yeah.
Okay. Kimberly is asking, can you speak about the work on the road to Ajo that seems to have wildlife fencing and ramps?
Yeah.
Were you involved? What can you say work in other areas such as tribal that have important animal movement?
Yeah. So there was planned a wildlife bridge and 2 wildlife underpasses. The underpasses were built, and this is on SR 87. No, yes, 86, 87, 86, SR 86, Ajo, on the way to cells. So it is on Altum land. It's on the tribal lands, and the tribe continues to be really involved with that, of course. So this is connecting basically San Bernardino and Bavakivri mountains across north and south of that highway, and that really important Avra Valley Wildlife Corridor connecting to the Altar Valley. So specifically, they were looking at trying to make sure there was passage for desert tortoises, which are a culturally sensitive species, bighorn sheep, and also jaguar, because that's a potential. Those wildlife underpasses were built, the fences were installed, and then there was a roadblock with the literal pun intended with the wildlife bridge plan. So that's still in the works. It's still being figured out because ADOT somehow did another construction road widening project there that made the design of the bridge no longer viable. So the 2 underpasses are there. There needs to be more maintenance done on the fences. So in the proposal is that in the next RTA, if that gets passed, we can look at that. But there's still money left from the last RTA to finish that fencing and get some of those things fixed and maintained. One lesson learned that came out of this project with SR 86 was making sure there's funding for the maintenance of that fence long term. And that ADOT has the schedule for doing that. So that's important. Also maintenance of the underpasses too, because we had a lot of infill from, it just floods and you get all that sediment and it slowly makes the opening smaller for some animals, and that happened in one case down there. So that's another one that we learned about. So that project is still happening actually, and ADOT and the tribe is working right now with Game and Fish, and we are involved in that conversation too, or have been, mostly just mediating, I guess, or not even that, but just, keeping the momentum going on the project, because that wildlife bridge now is going to have to become an underpass probably. And so it's going to require looking at it all again from a design point. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, there is a comment from Joseph saying that he thinks that in Western Colorado, car insurance companies are paying for this wildlife fencing.
I love that. I mean, I think we can get really creative, and there's national groups too that get together on calls. kind of like too many cooks in the kitchen, but talking about how we can fund this. Now we have we had the Federal Wildlife Corridors Act gave us some money to fund the bridge that's being built up near Flagstaff. And I think more and more companies are seeing the value of this too. You're right. It's just a matter of like outreach and making them aware of it. That's really great. I think we should have more companies and private donations going to some of these things. One thing though is that like with the fencing, it can be really effective to put in the wildlife funnel fencing to exclude animals from the road and reduce accidents. But if you don't have the crossing structure included as that project, then what you've done is broken the linkage entirely and you're harming the wildlife population. So we have to make sure that when we're looking to partner and fund some of these projects, we have to do both. We can't just do the fencing. Fencing is cheaper and low-hanging fruit, and it solves the problem for some people, but not everyone. So we want to keep advocating for those crossing structures in there too.
Okay. Ian is saying that in some areas, small species such as turtles enter the area in between railroad tracks, and they struggle to climb over the rails, ultimately overheating in the sun. Yeah.
Oh, if you have records of that, Ian, I'd love to see them. I mean, love is a strong word. I would be very interested in seeing those records. That's a really good story to tell, actually, about the impact of railroads. And because railroads are largely privately owned, it's very hard to do studies on them or near them because there's no like process for getting a research permit, and they can be kind of the railroad companies can be hard to work with, hard to contact in general. But yeah, it's kind of like, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think I did see a paper discussing that more in the eastern part of the U.S. with box turtles, but I'll see if I can dig that up and send that.
I'll look for it too, but thank you. Yeah, so essentially you're saying the railroad railroad tracks are acting kind of like little funnel fences for the herps. I can see that. They're getting stuck inside of it. We need little
Correct.
tortoise turtle jump outs on the railroad tracks. Tortoise ramps.
Okay, there is another message comment from Mead. She's saying, and you can read it, but she's saying for all experts, and Mead Meyer Wellborn now works for the flood control with me at the flood control district. She's one of our planners. So she is looking for, let me see, experts and stakeholders on the call. If somebody is here, please contact her, because Pima County Regional Flood Control District is gathering contact names of wildlife connectivity experts interested in helping to evaluate location for ramps and other means to facilitate wildlife movement across and through the district flood control facilities. Yes.
Very cool.
And we have a few minutes left. Rachel says, I vaguely remember a mountain lion being killed by a train at Cienega Creek many years ago.
I would like to see that record too, actually. So another one of our studies was, we wrapped it up in 2 or 3 years. It was funded by the Arizona Game and Fish Heritage Fund, and we had cameras in about 10 culverts, including the bridges, Cienega Creek Bridge and Davidson Canyon Bridge under I-10 at Cienega Creek, to look at wildlife passage in those culverts and justify the need for wildlife funnel fencing at bare minimum, because the crossings exist. They're just not funneled to them, between like Vail and Benson, essentially. And we found lots of mountain lions quite a few mountain lions using those underpasses, and black bears too. The problem is that we don't have any funnel fencing there. So like bears and lions can just choose to go up and over the ridge and onto the highway. And I've got 4 bear records on I-10 that have been hit, so far at least. So those kinds of records are things that I'm really interested in collecting and putting together in one place.
We have a quick, I think a very interesting question from Jim. He's asking, and I already have an answer. That's the funny thing. Could this overpass also incorporate a hiking or mountain bike trail? I'm curious to say what you think about it.
Okay, I'll share what I think about it. I will say that the ramp does incorporate the loop. There is a trail, a little path. The loop path is going over that.
Yeah.
So that is there. And I have had people ask me about that and whether that would affect wildlife use.
Mhm.
So there have been studies in Europe actually where they did combine the wildlife bridge with a hiking trail. And essentially the answer is that if people are present, the animals are not. So if you want it to be the most effective, you really can't combine those things. In Europe, they had some success in making the grades separate. So like people are walking down here and the animals are walking up here, and separating it with vegetation and all these other things. So there's ways to mitigate it, but most wildlife, even the wildlife that is super urban, like our javelinas and coyotes that are used to being in this suburban area and living in Tucson amongst us, will avoid it if they can, if there's people there. Which is another reason why we frequently get our most frequent crossers, wildlife use is at night. So.
Right. Fantastic. I have one more quick thing I want to say about the wildlife ramp. That project was completed by the Regional Flood Control District, but that was a project that was identified as a part of the Santa Cruz River Management Plan. So in the near future, if we got some of the people in the audience gets invited to participate in a new plan that the Regional Flood Control is starting, just go, please participate, because all these cool projects happen. If they get in as part of the plan, the Regional Flood Control District will build it. So if you just be active, because we always want your inputs and your ideas. So, and with that, thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Awesome.
I will add
presentation.
really quickly too that we adopted the highway, the frontage road actually, for highway pickups to clean up trash, and we'll be out there September 20th. If you want to come join us and see the site and pick up trash with us, we'll be out there doing that.
Okay.
We got lots of opportunities to go see it if people want a tour.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. See you in a month.